Emma had always embraced the peaceful rhythm of her life in the vibrant city of San Francisco. She was independent, passionate about her hobbies reading, painting, and the quiet companionship of her dog, Max. Their small apartment was her sanctuary, a space filled with the soft hum of creativity and contentment. She had never been the type to crave drama or complicated relationships, preferring the calm solitude of her world. That was until she met Jack. Their encounter had been completely unremarkable at first. A chance meeting at a local coffee shop where Emma was sketching in her notebook, and Jack, sitting at the next table, struck up a conversation about her artwork. It didn't take long for their chats to deepen, and what started as an exchange of pleasantries quickly became a connection neither of them had expected. Jack was charming, intelligent, and had an easy way of making Emma feel understood. They laughed over shared interests and talked about everything from literature to the quirky things Max did every day. In time, their bond grew. Jack became a regular part of Emma's life. Their evenings spent together became something Emma looked forward to, even though she didn't have to say it out loud. Max seemed to grow comfortable with Jack's presence as well, curling up beside them on the couch, his steady breathing a soft presence in the room. But something started to feel off. It was subtle at first, small things Emma couldn't quite place. Max, usually an affectionate dog, started acting a little differently around Jack. He would follow them around the apartment more closely, his eyes tracking their every movement. Emma thought nothing of it at first. Dogs were just naturally curious, right? Still, as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The real shift occurred one evening when Emma returned home from a grocery run to find Max sitting at the edge of the bedroom door, his eyes wide and unblinking. Jack had stayed over that night, and while Emma had been out, it seemed Max had been unusually quiet, almost too still. His gaze followed Emma as she moved around the room, and for the first time, she felt a strange unease in his presence. As days turned into weeks, Emma couldn't ignore the odd behavior any longer. Max, the dog who had once been so affectionate, was now acting distant and, at times, disturbingly focused on her and Jack's interactions. It started with Max watching them intently whenever they were in close proximity, his eyes never straying from their movements. At first, Emma attributed it to protective instincts after all. Dogs were known to be territorial, especially when someone new entered their owner's life, but things grew more complicated. Max began to show signs of agitation whenever Jack was around. He would growl softly under his breath when Jack reached for Emma's hand or when they shared a quiet moment on the couch. Emma would brush it off, thinking maybe Max was just getting used to the changes in their routine. But then, one night, after Jack had left for the evening, Emma caught Max staring at the closed door of the bedroom, his ears perked as though waiting for something. It was then that the knot in her stomach tightened. Max had always been a calm dog, but these behaviors were unlike anything Emma had seen before. Confused and a little scared, Emma decided to confront Jack about it. She shared her concerns, half expecting him to brush it off, but to her surprise, Jack took it seriously. Maybe it's just him adjusting to me being here more often, Jack suggested, his brow furrowing. Pets can be strange like that. He'll get used to me, but deep down, Emma wasn't convinced. The strange intensity of Mac's behavior seemed more than just jealousy or territoriality. It was as if the dog knew something that Emma didn't. The tension continued to build between the three of them. While Jack was unaware of the full extent of Emma's growing discomfort, Mac's strange behavior was becoming harder for her to ignore. Emma began to feel trapped between her growing love for Jack and her increasing unease with Max's actions. It wasn't just the dog anymore, it was the unspoken gap between her and Jack, the unvoiced fears she had begun to harbor about what this new dynamic meant. One day, while Jack was out of town for work, Emma decided to take Max to the vet. She needed answers. The vet couldn't pinpoint any medical issues but suggested that Emma might need to adjust how she was interacting with Max. The advice was simple enough: spend more time with him individually, create a new routine, and reassure him of his place in Emma's life. Yet, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it wasn't just about Max adjusting. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite understand. As the days passed, Emma found herself becoming more withdrawn. She didn't want to tell Jack how she was feeling, she didn't want to appear paranoid or irrational. But with every strange look Max gave her, every moment of tension when Jack wasn't around, Emma felt a growing divide between herself and both of them. She didn't know how to bridge the gap. Her life, once so peaceful, was now filled with an undercurrent of confusion and fear. Emma knew she had to confront her feelings, but the fear of losing either Jack or Max left her paralyzed. Every attempt at peace felt fleeting, and every resolution seemed just out of reach. As the weeks passed, Emma's discomfort with the situation only deepened. What once seemed like a series of innocent, strange occurrences began to feel like something far more profound. The dog, Max, who had once been her loyal companion, seemed to be slowly distancing himself from her. She could no longer deny it. The animal was no longer acting like a pet. It was as if Max had become a silent witness to something she couldn't comprehend. She had noticed the shift in his behavior more than once. He would linger at the door of the bedroom, staring at her with unsettling intensity. His eyes, usually soft and warm, now seemed colder, more distant. Emma tried to reassure herself that it was just her imagination, that Max was simply reacting to the changes in their routine. But deep down, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Jack, of course, had no idea. He continued to shower Emma with affection, filling her life with laughter and warmth. Their relationship had been growing stronger, with deeper conversations and shared experiences. Yet, every time Max would fixate on them, every time the dog's eyes would narrow in that eerie way, Emma felt a jarring disconnect, a silent rift forming between her and the man she thought she had grown to trust. She tried to brush it off. She didn't want to sound paranoid or irrational. Jack was kind, patient, and understanding. But Emma had always trusted her instincts, and they were telling her that something was off. It wasn't just Max anymore. It was everything: the energy in the apartment, the way the air seemed to thicken whenever she and Jack were together. It was the unsettling sense that something was lurking just beneath the surface, something that neither of them could see. Her thoughts became consumed by these questions. What did Max know that she didn't? Why did the dog act as if it was guarding her from something, from Jack? Emma had tried everything to break the pattern. She had changed routines, given Max more attention, and even taken him to the vet to make sure there wasn't an underlying medical issue. Yet the odd behaviors persisted. One evening, when Jack was away on a business trip, Emma sat alone in the living room, Max lying by her feet. The dog had been eerily quiet all day, not following her around like he usually did. His eyes were fixed on the window, the distant horizon pulling his focus away from her. There was an unsettling calmness in the air, and Emma couldn't help but feel that the apartment was holding its breath. As she stared at the dog, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if Max wasn't just reacting to the presence of Jack? What if there was something deeper, something that neither of them could understand, something that had to do with her? The realization sent a cold shiver down her spine. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She stayed up late, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't control. The quiet in the apartment seemed louder than ever, and every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made her jump. She felt trapped, caught between her growing fears and her desire to maintain a sense of normalcy. The following week, the tension in the apartment reached its peak. Emma could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The strain was becoming unbearable. Jack had been away on a weekend trip, and she had taken the opportunity to reflect on everything that had been happening. The distance between her and Max had become more pronounced, and she couldn't ignore the sense of alienation that seemed to hang in the air whenever Jack wasn't around. It was during this period of self reflection that Emma decided to confront the issue head on. She couldn't go on living in a state of constant uncertainty. She needed answers that would make sense of the confusion, the strange behavior, and the feeling of being watched that seemed to permeate every aspect of her life. One evening, after Jack returned, Emma sat him down. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to explain the situation. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision. She told him everything: the dog's behavior, her growing unease, the way she felt as if something was wrong, something beyond her understanding. Jack listened patiently, his brow furrowing in concern. Emma, I know you're feeling anxious, he said softly, but Max is just a dog. He's probably just adjusting to the changes. Maybe he's just feeling a little territorial, but Emma couldn't accept that explanation anymore. She had tried to convince herself of that, but it didn't make sense. She had seen the look in Mac's eyes, the way the dog seemed to know something she didn't. It wasn't just jealousy, it was as if Max was protecting her from something intangible that she couldn't identify. In the silence that followed, Emma felt the weight of her fears pressing down on her. She had hoped that Jack would offer some comfort, some explanation that would ease her mind. But instead, she was left with an unsettling sense of being alone in this confusion, struggling to make sense of everything that was happening around her. That night, as they lay in bed, Emma's thoughts refused to settle. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for her to make a decision, to face whatever truth was lurking in the shadows. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing, as Max lay curled at the foot of the bed, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Was she losing her grip on reality? Or was there something else, something more sinister that she hadn't yet uncovered? The questions haunted her, keeping her awake for hours. She knew that the next step in her journey was inevitable. She had to uncover the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. But at what cost? The weight of uncertainty loomed large over her, and as she drifted into a restless sleep, she knew that the coming days would force her to confront the dark unknown that was threatening to consume her life. The tension in the apartment had become unbearable for Emma. It felt as though she were walking on the edge of something she couldn't understand, something out of her control. She had tried to rationalize the strange occurrences, to convince herself that she was simply imagining things, but deep down, she knew she couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that seemed to envelop her life. Jack had been understanding when she had shared her concerns, but Emma could sense that he was beginning to grow frustrated. He wanted to believe that everything was fine, that their life together was normal, but Emma knew that they were standing on the edge of a precipice. It wasn't just about Mac's odd behavior anymore, it was about something deeper, something that neither she nor Jack could fully grasp. One evening, as Jack returned from a late meeting, Emma decided that it was time to confront the situation head on. She couldn't keep living with this fear gnawing at her. The uncertainty was starting to affect her every move, every thought. She needed clarity no matter what it took. Jack, Emma began, her voice trembling slightly, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about Max anymore. It's about us, about everything. I feel like something is wrong. Something I can't explain, but I know it's there. Jack looked at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. Emma, I've heard you say this before, but what exactly do you think is happening? Are you sure it's not just stress or anxiety? Maybe the changes in your routine, the move, it's a lot to handle. Emma shook her head, a sinking feeling in her chest. It's more than that. It's as though something has shifted and I can't ignore it anymore. It's Max. It's the apartment. Everything feels different. Jack sighed and sat down beside her. Emma, you're scaring me. I don't know what to tell you. I don't want you to feel alone in this, but I don't know how to help if you can't explain it. She took a deep breath. I don't think I can explain it fully, but I know that something is wrong. I've been trying to push it out of my mind, but it keeps growing. And I don't know how much longer I can ignore it. There was a long silence between them. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. Jack reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. You don't have to go through this alone. His words were meant to comfort her, but in that moment, they only made the truth clearer. She didn't feel like she could confide in him completely. He didn't understand, and perhaps he never would. The next few days passed in a haze. Emma felt as though she were living in a dream detached, floating above everything, unable to fully engage with the world around her. She had tried to speak with a therapist, but even that hadn't provided the clarity she was seeking. Every time she tried to describe the feeling of being watched, the heaviness in the apartment, the coldness of Max's stare, she was met with polite nods and suggestions that it might be stress or depression, that it might be stress or depression. But Emma knew that it was something deeper, something that couldn't be solved with a prescription or a series of calming words. Then came the night that would change everything. Emma had been unable to sleep. It had been a restless few weeks, and tonight was no different. She sat in the living room, the moonlight streaming in through the window, casting shadows across the room. Max was curled up by her feet, his eyes still as intense as ever. But tonight there was something different, something almost knowing about his gaze. She stood up slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt more certain of her instincts than in that moment. Max wasn't just a dog, he wasn't just reacting to the changes around him. He knew something that she needed to understand. Emma walked to the door of the bedroom, her steps slow but purposeful. She paused before entering, a sense of dread creeping up her spine. Something was waiting for her, something she had been avoiding. As she opened the door, she immediately saw what it was. The apartment was completely still, but there, in the center of the room, was a single object that hadn't been there before. It was a small, old box one she didn't recognize. It was a strange sight in the otherwise minimalist room. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she approached the box, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. She knelt down slowly, her hands trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside, there was nothing but a single piece of paper, yellowed with age, and written in a script that seemed foreign yet strangely familiar. The words were short, cryptic, but chilling. He sees you. He knows what you've done. Emma's blood ran cold as she read the message again, and then again, it was a message that made no sense. She'd never seen this box before, and she certainly didn't know who it referred to or what it meant. But one thing was clear, the message was meant for her. And it was a message that Max had known about all along. The realization hit Emma with a force she wasn't prepared for. Max hadn't just been acting strangely, he had been warning her about something or someone that was watching her, something she had no control over. The question now wasn't why Max was acting this way, but what she was supposed to do with this newfound knowledge. She glanced back at the dog, who was now standing at the doorway, watching her with those same unblinking eyes. His gaze was not one of affection, not one of affection, not one of love. It was something far more knowing. Emma wasn't sure whether to feel comforted or terrified. In that moment, she understood that Max wasn't just her pet. He was something else entirely, and she had no idea what that something was. The days following the discovery of the mysterious box felt like a blur to Emma. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into something far deeper than she could understand. The cryptic message, "He sees you. He knows what you've done," echoed in her mind constantly, like a haunting refrain. What did it mean? Who was it referring to? And why had it appeared now, at this very moment in her life? The questions gnawed at her as she tried to go about her daily routine, but everything felt distorted. The apartment, once a place of comfort, now felt foreign to her. The walls seemed to close in as though they were watching her. Even the air felt thick with a sense of impending doom, as though something was lurking just out of sight, waiting to pounce. Mac's behavior only made things worse. He had always been a loyal companion, but now he seemed different. His eyes, once filled with affection, now seemed distant, as though they were calculating something she couldn't quite grasp. He followed her around, his steps silent but ever present, like a shadow she couldn't escape. And when he wasn't following her, he would sit at the window, staring out into the night, his body rigid as though he were waiting for something to appear. Emma had tried to confront Jack about it, but every time she mentioned it, he dismissed her concerns. "You're overthinking things, Emma," he would say. "It's just stress. We've been through a lot lately," but Emma knew it was more than that. There was something here, something that couldn't be explained away, and she wasn't going to let it go. Not now. One night, unable to sleep, Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She had seen the way Max reacted to certain things, how he seemed to know things before they happened, how he would grow agitated at certain times of the day, as though something was about to occur. She had to understand what it was. She had to confront the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. She spent hours researching, trying to make sense of the cryptic message, scouring the internet for anything that might give her a clue. It was then that she stumbled across a forum post from someone who claimed to have experienced something similar. The post was vague, filled with fragmented sentences and half baked theories, but it mentioned something that made Emma's heart race. The Watcher never leaves, it knows your secrets. Emma's pulse quickened. Could it be that whatever was happening to her had happened to others before? Could this be some sort of curse, or was it something far more sinister? She read the post over and over, the words sinking into her mind. It was as though someone had been watching her from the very beginning, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The next day, as she sat at the kitchen table, Max walked into the room. He didn't look at her this time. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the corner of the room, as though something had caught his attention. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, his body tense, his eyes locked on a spot in the room that Emma couldn't see. A chill ran down her spine. Mac's behavior had become increasingly strange, but this was different. There was something deliberate about the way he stood there, like he was waiting for something or someone without thinking. Emma stood up and followed him. She walked toward the corner of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked closely, trying to see what he was so focused on, but there was nothing there. Just the usual furniture, the lamp casting soft light across the floor. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden, something lurking just beneath the surface. Suddenly, Max growled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a jolt of fear through Emma. She instinctively stepped back, but Max didn't move. His growl deepened and his body stiffened as though he were preparing for a fight. Emma's eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of danger, but there was nothing. Then, in the silence, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the wall. It was so soft at first, she thought it might have been her imagination, but then it grew louder, more distinct, as though something or someone was trying to get through. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had to get out of there. Without thinking, she turned and fled from the room, her footsteps pounding against the floor. She ran into the hallway and slammed the door behind her, heart racing. She looked down at Max, who was still standing in the doorway, his eyes now filled with a mixture of concern and caution. For the first time, Emma wondered if Max was trying to protect her from something that had been hiding in the shadows all along. Jack returned home later that evening, and Emma immediately told him what had happened. She recounted the strange noises, Max's odd behavior, and her growing sense of unease. But as usual, Jack dismissed her concerns, his tone calm but patronizing. Emma, I think you're just letting your mind get the better of you. There's nothing wrong with Max. There's nothing wrong with this apartment. You need to relax. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was wrong. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. This wasn't just paranoia, it was real. And whatever was happening, it was only just beginning. The night grew darker, and the air in the apartment seemed to grow colder. Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What had she unleashed by discovering the box? What had she uncovered that night when she opened it? And why did Max seem to know more than she did as the clock ticked on? The weight of the unknown pressed down on her. She could feel the presence in the apartment, the silent watcher who had been there all along. But now it was no longer content to remain hidden, and Emma realized, with a chill creeping down her spine, that she had unknowingly crossed a line, one from which there was no turning back.